Kamen Rider Force, episode 23, the 14th episode. We begin with a couple of motorcycle riding punks stealing some lady's bag. They're stopped in their tracks by this week's monster, a bird-manly kind of guy who introduces himself as Kycknos the Swan Hero. I actually really like that name, so for once I'll let it be. He beats the thugs and presumably flies off into the night as Kycknos the Swan Heroes want to. Then suddenly, it's daylight at Spacey Space High School. Fjosengard and friends overhear some students talking about the new hero in town, so Fjosengard's all like, "It's about fucking time, I beat like a dozen space monsters over the last 6 months. Granted, it usually takes me an episode of losing to the monster to beat it after, but still, it's about damn time someone noticed." Boring douchebag reminds Fjosengard that the whole world knowing who Fjosengard is could be problematic. He reminds Fjosengard of this by shouting in the classroom, "Hey, if too many people catch on that you're really forced, that could be problematic. You know, since Kamen Riders are supposed to be unsung hero types." No one seems to hear him on account of his boring nature. Suddenly, a cosplayer appears. Given half a night to prepare, he came to school dressed as Kycknos the Swan Hero. He's also apparently part of a Kycknos the Swan Hero fan club, along with his inconspicuously conspicuous Jufro buddy that hangs by him. Wanting to know who the hell Kycknos the Swan Hero is, Fjosengard and pals check out this fan club, except for boring douchebag who broods at the rest of Fjosengard's pals while waiting. His life is so hard after all, but with his giant robot and superhero friends and instantaneous transport to his personal moon base. I don't know how he deals with it. To think Fjosengard would want to waste his time sorting who some space monster looking vigilante is. Doesn't he know there's space monsters to prepare for? Speaking of, Clawful pops up in front of Fjosengard at the school. So they fight while Donna Troy thinks to himself that he's totally still an antagonist, despite doing nothing really antagonizing the last several episodes. It's a crab battle between Clawful and Fjors, though, so I'm gonna have to let the expert on crab battles talk for a bit. Snake Eater, it's time. Okay. In the field of battle, Pomajoran Fjosengard gets his ass beat. Then, writing some inspiring words about love and justice, Kycknos the Swan Hero arrives to help out. Seeing that he's no match for Kycknos the Swan Hero, Clawful flees the scene with some sort of clawishly awful pun that freezes Fjosengard in his tracks. Not really, he's just too much of a pussy to chase after him. That's why to me this rider's just another fat man. What the hell? I'm in a box and there's blood on my mouth. Right, the episode. We finally see the cult of Kycknos the Swan Hero, led by a ballerina who judges people in exactly the same way we saw Kycknos the Swan Hero judge Fjosengard earlier. I think I mentioned that, did I? I don't know. Apparently, when the cult of Kycknos the Swan Hero gathers, they pat each other on the back for doing good deeds and kiss the leader's ass. I'll call the leading ballerina girl Totally White Swan. Jufro, who I'm now pegging as the real Kycknos the Swan Hero, is also there. And it's not long before one of Fjosengard's Satan-worshipping friends... Okay, so his only Satan-worshipping friend, his only established Satan-worshipping friend, starts to get bad vibes from the whole cult of Kycknos, the Swan Hero. Seeing this, Donna Troy starts to escort her out of there, but they're blocked by Totally White Swan, who's all like, "Oh, you can't leave in the middle of our silly dance of Kycknos the Swan Hero." Did I forget to mention she was really a gay man? Well, she is, so yeah. The echo in the room confuses Donna Troy into thinking that he's thinking to himself, so he tells Totally White Swan that she's an ugly bitch and he's too cool for the cult of Kycknos the Swan Hero. I I guess she's dumbfounded enough to let them go after that. Donna Troy goes on to explain how he's the second Kamen Rider and he wants to save his friend's life and a whole bunch of boring stuff that no one wants to hear, so no one hears it. En route to somewhere, Donna Troy and Satan-worshipping girl, I'll call her Lucy, get to talking about how the cult of Kyknos the Swan Hero was kinda cultish. Lucy doesn't want the cult to worship something false, even though Kyknos the Swan Hero is real and she's seen him. And Donna Troy is just wondering how he's getting shipped with Lucy the Satan-worshipping girl. Meanwhile, Fjorzengaard's other friends have sorted that Kyknos the Swan Hero is really an anagram for Ak, no way, show nethers, which is just disjointed enough for Kyknos the Swan Hero to be evil. Sensing that his jig's up, Kyknos the Swan Hero pops up out of nowhere and attacks Donna Troy and Lucy. The two of them fend him off with an ice cream cone robot and call Fjorzengaard over to laugh at Kyknos the Swan Hero fighting an ice cream cone robot. Donna Troy figures that whole scene's gone on long enough though, so he changes forms, fending off Kyknos the Swan Hero surprisingly well, considering that Forz is more or less stronger than Donna Troy and couldn't touch Clawful, whereas Kyknos the Swan Hero beat his ass earlier. I guess it's like a rock, paper, scissors thing with a power balance. Well, more like Rocket Man, Fish Man, Swan Hero, but you get my drift. Eventually, Forz gets in on the action, and boring douchebag offers a new gadget for him to try. It's a boot that's about 2/3 the size of every other gadget Forz has used, so he takes note at how giant the boot is. Naturally, the boot conjures a larger boot-shaped gravity field several feet in front of it whenever Fjorzengaard stomps the ground. Now, as we all know, Swan Heroes are weak against the boot to the head, so Kyknos the Swan Hero flies off. No, he doesn't. He does a spinning bird kick to boot Fjorzengaard in the head, then says something about being Fjorzengaard's clone. But now he wants to be you. You, presumably referring to, Fjorzengaard in context. Since if Kyknos the Swan Hero was you, then who would be Nancy Pelosi? That's the end, so my thoughts on the episode. I've been thinking this whole time that we're supposed to be hearing Donna Troy's thoughts, but maybe he's just a crazy person that can throw his voice. I'd like to think that, so I will. Besides that, I hope there aren't too many crab battles on the way. And the preview for the next episode, Totally White Swan holds a space monster switch and says, "I'm Kyknos the Swan Hero." This only makes me more certain that Jufro is really Kyknos the Swan Hero. Next time, Forz Pores, a cup of joe. Or Forz's Pores, the acne crisis. Till then, good night and Godspeed love.